All right,
Is this on? Is this on? It's
you
on.
are on.
Okay, it's
So
on.
we've been told to be loud, so it's not that we don't like each other. We've been told to be loud. Barb, could you read just a little segment of your book to just give people a taste before I start grilling you with impertinent questions?
Impertinent questions. Sure. This is totally unrehearsed, just so you know. So it's going to be totally unfiltered, raw, and fresh. I didn't know he was going to ask me to read anything. Good thing my husband said as we were driving up from Chicago, "Are you going to read anything?" I was like, maybe I should look. So, okay. So how much do you want me to read? Like a paragraph?
Yeah, a paragraph or two.
A paragraph or two.
Mhm.
Okay. Here we go. All right. I'll start at what was going to be the beginning of my book till an editor got involved. Mine is a quotidian geography. The undulations of my topography are of the humdrum variety. No sharp chiseled summits, no crags in the rock. I live in the heartland, after all. A landscape long ago steamrolled into equanimity by ice age glaciers that erased most every speck of drama as they receded. Nowadays, the nearest flowing current to my old shingled house is a canal carved out of the prairie, one charged with curbing the flow of Dreck into the lake, the Great Lake, Michigan, the one neighborhood landmark worthy of capital letters, the one whose roar I can pick out if I train my ears keenly amid the howlings of incoming wind or winter storm. The woods I call my own are habitat to the homeliest of flocks, ones most often cloaked in iterations of drab. Chickadee, nuthatch, sparrow, siskin. We startle to any dab of color. Blue jay, red-headed flicker, the perennial cardinal. Word travels fast if barn owls swoop in. Sightings spread with ferocity. We are a people of dialed down expectation. And yet, I am attuned and on high alert to the filigree and bedazzlement of the author of it all, the one who paints the dawn in tourmaline streaks and salts the night sky in chalky, sometimes brilliant flecks, the one who thought to quench the thirst of the migrating butterfly with mists of fog and remembered that baby birds might do well to memorize the star-stitched tracings far, far above the nursery that is the nest.
Thank you. It's kind of amazing that someone who lives in Chicago could write that. But if you read her book, you'll know that she has plenty of places to watch nature. Now, this is a really smart audience.
Okay,
But
it's Milwaukee after all.
if you're explaining this book to a kid, like a nephew or a niece, what would you say your book's about?
I would say my book is about seeing the sacred, seeing God in all of creation, seeing the sacred in the rustlings of a meadow, seeing God in the flutterings of the birds, seeing God's in the oncoming rush of a thunderstorm, seeing and feeling God in the quietude that comes after the first snowfall.
Yeah, there's going to be a lot of that here. And having looked online for what other people have written about you, I'm going to be the least holy person that ever interviews you. So this is going to be an interesting challenge for us. You've written a lot of things that are spiritually focused and nature focused.
Mhm.
There's a very specific concept to this book, and you talk about it in the beginning. So it's not just I'm spiritual, Barbara, and I love nature, but could you explain briefly what the concept behind this book is?
So the concept, the book of nature,
Yes.
the book of nature, which happens to be the title of my book, but is also the name of an ancient and timeless theological construct idea that holds that long before there was scripture, for millennia, God's communication with all of human beings was through creation. And ancient peoples whose lives were tied to the earth, whose lives depended on what fell from the heavens. People, indigenous peoples have never relinquished their profound understanding of how sacred all of the earth and all of creation is. Eastern religions have never lost a sense of how sacred all of creation is. So it's this ancient idea that the book of nature is this profound place of encounter with the divine. And it's for us to read, to interact with, to watch closely, to ask questions, conjure questions, and draw wisdoms and wonder from everything we're surrounded by.
Is it fair that maybe some of this is true because people have been spiritual a lot longer than they've been literate?
Exactly. The first scripture was, words were not put on pages for a whole lot of time after people were wandering around, dropping things in the ground and watching it come out, or beholding the rain coming from the sky. So, and as human beings, we're wired, I believe, to reach for something beyond our small little selves. And that something is the divine, the sense of sacred, the author of it all. And so, of course, there was a sacred text that people were reading, the Egyptian desert fathers and mothers, the ancient Israelites, on and on and on. The Celts, I spent a lot of time talking about the Celts.
Yes, and we both thank you for that. So, would you mind sharing just a little, just explaining at the beginning of your book, you talk about the very specific inspiration here, and you were meeting with a spiritual advisor, and they said something to you.
They said something.
Yes.
He's setting me up. He does such a great job of setting up the author, right? Just like slow pitch me. Let me hit it. Let me try to hit it. If you knew how bad I was at baseball, you wouldn't use that metaphor. But anyway, so my first book was called Slowing Time, and it was a collection of essays arranged seasonally. So I was on this wonderful, wonderful radio show with a rabbi whose radio show, this was back in the days before podcasts. It was only 14 years ago, but it was 10 years ago, only 10 years ago, but podcasts weren't a big thing then. So I was on this radio show with Rabbi Rami Shapiro, whose radio show was called How to Be a Holy Rascal, which is just a great name for a radio show. So as a holy rascal myself, I was invited to his show, and we were talking about my first book, Slowing Time. And he just said in an offhanded way, he said, your book, Slowing Time, reads like Midrash to the book of nature. And as I wrote in the book, I was pretty excited for a lifelong Irish Catholic married to a wonderful Jewish man to be pinned with Midrash, which is, rabbinic commentary. It's not every day an Irish Catholic is told she writes Midrash. Might be the first time. But anyway, so that was cool. And then, but I was really fascinated by, I could tell the way he said it, that this book of nature was a phrase that was coming with capital letters. And I was like, wait a minute. How could I have grown up with a mom who had 5 children, but when she was taking home movies of the 5 children, if a Scarlett Tanager thought to run by or an indigo bunting, my mom's Kodak camera quickly left the children behind and was fixed on these bright birds in the trees. And I grew up, next to a creek and in the woods. How in the world could I not know about this thing called the Book of Nature? So I did what any curious person does in the 2020s, or I guess that was the 2010s. I Googled it, and I was like, what do you know? There's a thing called the Book of Nature. And the more curious I got, the deeper I dug, and here we are.
Now, I think you got to give yourself a little credit that anybody who went to Marquette and was tormented by Jesuits would be halfway to the Midrash idea of questioning and commenting in detail. You'd be halfway there at least.
Halfway there. He took me the other half.
That's right. So you write a number of times in this book, you're a person of Catholic origin, married a Jewish man. you write a lot about your love and respect for Jewish faith and Jewish tradition. So what appeals to you about that tradition, especially in light of this book?
I love Judaism. I have wholly embraced it. I love that it's a home-centered religion. Every Friday night we have Shabbat. We light the candles, we bless the challah, we bless the wine. I think the combination of I've always been a person who's keenly aware of language, and because Jewish prayers were new to me when I entered the synagogue in my 30s, the language of Jewish prayers and teachings and all the Jewish holidays are so creation-centered. There's always just these beautiful, beautiful references to agrarian references, references to likening God's attention to us as to that of a mote of dust. I remember being like, wow, a mote of dust. God is paying as much attention to me as a mote of dust. I like that. And the Jewish holidays, for instance, Shabbat is you light the Shabbat candles 18 minutes before sunset. So you're paying attention to the falling of the sun. And Shabbat ends roughly 25 hours later when the first 3 medium-sized stars are seen in the heavens. So there's just this, and the Jewish calendar is a lunar calendar. So it's the new moon, the full moon, and it just draws your attention to all of creation in really beautiful ways. And when I think back to the ancient Israelites, who, as I mentioned earlier, whose lives were just so dependent on all the agrarian rhythms, of course, their sacred literature would be filled with those references.
I'm just curious, do you do Sukkot in your family?
We do. Sukkot is, well, we sort of do. We don't. Our synagogue, okay, my husband says, so we also joke in my family that I'm Irish, and so I can exaggerate when I tell stories. It's my DNA. So yeah, we do Sukkot big. We have a screen porch that's attached to our garage, and I carry the food out on a tray, and I'm sitting in a screened room. So that's kind of Sukkot, and we eat outside. And our synagogue built, okay, he's over there like raising his eyebrow at me that I'm making up stories, but I'm not. Our synagogue builds a sukkah every year, and I've helped.
If Blair, if you need the EpiPen during this event, just let us know. Okay. All right, great. Slightly more seriously,
Yes, sir.
if you can remember, I wanted to ask you, what was your first mystical experience?
Oh my God. My first truly mystical experience?
You get to define this.
Okay. So in my first book, I don't know why I got so brave to write about. I did have a profound mystical experience, which will probably have people chasing me out the store. But it was something I felt very vulnerable writing about. And I was on Chicago's, the local Chicago kind of PBS version of a news hour. And being a great journalist like you, the first question he asked me on television about this story I was kind of shy that I'd written about anyway, was he asked me about this very story that you asked me. So my mystical experience was, I was in high school. I was with my mom on a silent retreat at this retreat house out in the country. And this is really wild to talk about it in a room full of people. But anyway, I was in the chapel on a Friday night all by myself. And I looked up at the crucifix, and it was profoundly beautiful. Jesus's face started changing like a Kodak slideshow, from an older Chinese man to a Black woman to a Native American to a child to a woman, and it just kept changing and changing and changing. And I felt this like washed over sense of a tsunami of grace. And I was, tears were pouring down my face. And the profound message I walked away from, which has informed my whole life, including one of my most important works at the Tribune, which was documenting the faces of hunger across America, was to see the face of God in every person you meet.
Wow.
So there was not an oak tree in that mystical moment, but maybe if it happened again, I'd have a cardinal and an oak tree and a butterfly.
We're going to get a little technical here because I was a philosophy minor. What, yes. Would you talk about the difference between pantheism and panentheism? Because I think you're the latter.
I better be the latter.
Yes,
I better be the latter. I better be the latter. And I pulled out the italics key and when I wrote that sentence to make sure people see that pantheism is not the same. Hi, Anna. Is not the same as panentheism. Pantheism is you think the tree is God. Panentheists think that there is the godly within that tree and that sacred animation, that dynamism is what I'm responding to. I'm responding to that spark of the divine that resides in all of creation, and all of us are creation. So it's an important distinction.
Yes. And we will get to audience questions eventually. I want to hit her with a few more here first. And let me just check my cheat list. So your book is something of a bait and switch here. I noticed you have this in common with
This one's a hard-hitting journalist.
you have this kind of in common with John Sweeney's book too, which is also
okay.
John Sweeney has a new book called Sit in the Sun, which is about the spiritual wisdom of the cats. And John's book, you think, oh, this is going to be fun stuff about cats, and yours is going to be fun stuff about nature. And they're books about all this reading they did, quoting all these like masters from 1,000 traditions and all of these like complicated names. And so how much spiritual reading do you do?
I did. And one of the things I loved so much about writing this book, and I've thought a lot about, as a journalist, your job is to, when you're trying to tell a story, you go out and you find the absolute best sources, the people who know the most, who know most accurately, who have sort of the deepest, broadest sense of whatever it is you're trying to explain. So when I set out to write this book, it became very much an exercise in reading. And I, like you, was almost had a minor in theology at Marquette, but when you're a nursing student, it's kind of hard to do that. But so I turned to all these sources as a journalist had been trained to do. I don't rely on my own intelligence. I mean, my intelligence helps me to read and to ask questions, and my curiosity propels me forward. But it was just this magnificent exercise in, I call it the rabbit hole school of reading. And I would read one author, and that author would cite, 3 or 4 or 7 or 8 other authors who they believed knew more and more deeply than they did. So then I would go read all 7 or 8 of those people. It was actually, I think it was the beginning of COVID. So I had lots of time to read. My office ended up kind of a dangerous place. Blair would wander in there and think, oh my God, she's going to get killed from the stacks of books. I ended up reading about 200 books for this book. And the most beautiful parts of the book are these brilliant people. I just quote and quote and quote. And I had the best time. I would like read someone, and if their quote just like, hit me like a lightning bolt, that would be one of the quotes I would put in the book. So
your book has like segments on wind and water and stars. Were you plowing these books for give me wind stuff, or were you just reading them? And did you know the plan of the book when you were doing this reading?
No, I started. So the book is divided. The beginning of the book is a deep dive into this whole concept of, and all these thinkers who are pondering the book of nature. And then the second chapter is about this the spiritual practice of paying attention, which is at the core of every spiritual practice, paying particular attention. And then my editor asked me, fascinatingly, she told me she wanted me to pull pages from my own book of nature. She wanted me to write meditations, essays about those places and moments that most stirred the sacred in me. And so I ended up, the architecture of the book came after much of the reading. But then I probably supplemented, when I was writing about wind, I had read plenty of people who had written something about wind, but then I also found a couple other magnificent and poetic books that just were deep dives into a few particular subjects.
Save those notes, because I think in a
I've got
couple years, you can do a page a day calendar with all these quotes. I think you can do it. You got enough already. So
He's a newspaper man like us. And when you're a newspaper man, you got to figure out how in the world can I make a living doing what I do?
That's right.
When the newspapers are dwindling by the minute.
We don't want to talk about it. This
We
is a
don't
happy
want to-
event.
This is a happy event. It's a happy event. Yes.
So you have a lot of great spiritual thinkers in this book. You have Thomas Merton and Robin Wall Kimmerer and great Buddhist thinkers and indigenous thinkers and spiritual people. And then you have the guy who did Curious George.
Yeah.
So tell us how the author of Curious George fits into your very serious and profound spiritual book.
I love Jim Higgins's review story about this book is a treasure for all time for me. And the fact that you, in your Milwaukee Journal Sentinel USA/Today article, mentioned my sourcing of H.A. Rey, just delighted the heck out of me. So H.A. Rey, in addition to writing about Curious George, which we all know, he wrote a book about how to read the stars a long time ago. And when our boys, we have two boys, almost 30, he turns 30 in 2 days, and a little 21-year-old, he's not little, but he's still my little boy, 21. When they were growing up, I was sort of an avid book buyer, and I had this fabulous store that just stocked all kinds of esoterica. And one of the esotericas was this book H.A. Rey wrote about how to read the stars. And he believed brilliantly that these, the classical Greek and Latin names for stars like Cassiopeia, like that's a little bit hard for a kid to wrap their head around. But if you tell a kid that there's this circus in the sky and there's tigers and there's bears and there's snakes and there's crabs, little children might be able to see that. So since I'm pretty much a remedial star reader, I had to go to H.A. Rey and have him teach me a little bit about how to read the stars.
That is one of the hidden gems you'll find in her book. So an argument for reading it. Your experience as a pediatric oncology nurse, you couldn't pick like some easy kind of nursing. You did pediatric oncology nursing. How does that fit into the person and the spiritual person you are today?
Another great question that I wouldn't have expected. Being a pediatric oncology nurse was profound. I loved being a nurse. I thought I was going to be a nurse for the rest of my life. But I ended up becoming a writer because my dad died suddenly. And at his funeral, they read a letter I had written to my dad. And then after the funeral, someone took me to lunch. He worked at a Chicago ad agency. And they said, "Kid, you can write. Have you ever thought of journalism?" So I made the switch. But I loved nursing and I loved working at Children's Memorial in Chicago, taking care. I mean, I guess I've just always all my life been drawn deep into the emotional core of things, and taking care of kids with cancer who were fearless for the most part, and their parents who were trembling and filled with fear was a profound experience for the first, I think I really only worked there for almost 3 years, 2.5, 3 years. Then I went to Medill, and then the I got a job at the Tribune and then I wrote stories, but I often was drawn to deeply emotionally complex stories because the landscape of the heart and the soul is a place I'm endlessly drawn to.
So speaking of kids, I told you I would say what I originally wrote about you. So I wrote in this thing about, Barbara is a mystic. And the original version of that, I wrote a mystic in a suburban mom kind of way.
Oh,
And it's interesting. And I didn't mean anything bad by that. My editor, who's a woman who's about 30 years younger than I am, said to me, "Are you making fun of her? Are you saying she's like June Cleaver?" And I said, no. She's talking about making your kids lunch and going in her backyard. And that's not me to. So would you have taken that as offensive?
No.
Do you deny being a suburban mom?
No,
Okay.
no, I am a mom and I live in a suburb. So if you put those two together, I guess I'm a suburban mom. See, the thing about words is sometimes it depends how they're put together. It's in the put togetherness that the friction might come, but I'm a suburban mom.
Put together in this.
I drive a station wagon and I buy groceries and I used to get up early to make lunches.
That's the key.
Yep.
Yeah.
Get up early to make lunches.
What do you think the effect on your sons has been of having a mystic for a mom?
I don't think they think I'm a mystic. They think I'm a kook. I think they get it. The more profound journey for them is that they grew up in a house that was, very Catholic and very Jewish. And that's an interesting road to hoe. And we took it really seriously. And Chicago at the time, when the boys were little, was at the forefront of Jewish Catholic relations. So there was this fabulous school called the Family School, in which we taught Catholicism and we taught Judaism, and we didn't try to invent a third rail. So they grew up, and I get some of it from my mom, and my mom was also, we call her the original Mother Nature. My mom was very much a presence in their life, so they get it from her too. So you can't blame it all on me. So
you're saying when it came to religion in your house, you had a both and approach.
We had a very both and, very, yeah. And then I've added a few others because I think other ones are fascinating too. So bring them on.
When I was your book's so positive, it's so positive about nature and what we can take from it or appreciate from it. And then you do reserve some time in the end for the climate emergency we live in and the human destruction of natural environments. Were you tempted at all to spend more time on that subject?
No, really. It's a really important part of the book, but so the really important urgent message that percolates a little bit throughout, but that comes through strong in the epilogue, which is the Lamentations for the Book of Nature, is that if you see all of creation as this channel for the sacred, this place of encounter with the divine, then the pummeling and the desecration of all of creation is all the more profound and devastating. So I wanted mostly to pull this beautiful idea out from the cobwebs so that we could understand that nature isn't just like a pretty thing to look at or a nice thing to listen to, but it's this dynamic relationship with the divine, with the sacred. And if I could accentuate that and give people entry points in to their own connection with the sacred. So plenty of people already love nature, and that's not, but to begin to interact with it in a more textural way. If I could get people to see the sacred there, then the whole climate crisis and all the devastations only becomes more profound and more urgent. But I didn't want to clobber people over the head with that.
Right.
I wanted to entice them first and then clobber.
When you run into somebody who says, oh, my religion is nature or my church is nature, what kind of a reaction do you have to that?
I'm open, however you find the sacred,
Yeah.
however the sacred stirs you,
Yeah.
is like that's your path. That's your path, and take it and embrace it and go where it leads you. If it leads you to something sacred, and that sacred responds to you in the ways you need to be responded to.
Maybe tell them to get a library card too and check out some of these guys. Let's say somebody here was starting to catch fire on what you're talking about and looking at your book, and how would you suggest someone get started on the road you've gone on with this? Like, to be a little more deliberate about it.
I think the reason I turn to all these sages and seers and poets and prophets is they taught me to see and to want to see more and more and more. So I think if you begin by reading through the beginning chapters and just start to get a sense that, and then at the end of the book, just because it became this wonderful exercise in reading, I included a section called the Bookshelf of Wonder, in which I cite the top 12, like I didn't set out to pick only 12, but I picked the top, like the 12 books that most profoundly drew me deep into this. And then I go through subject by subject. So I tell you, if you happen to be enchanted by wind, these are the best books I read on wind, so that it becomes sort of like me sitting next to you saying, oh, this is the one you want to read. But I would have you just start reading some of these sages.
It is so Judeo-Christian picking 12. I mean, that is so much.
He earned his minor in philosophy. He did. The Jesuits would love that you got that.
The Jesuits have not claimed me very much since I left many years ago.
I don't think they claim me either. I don't think the College of Nursing claims me
Who has a
either.
question for Barbara? If you could raise your hand so I could see you. Please.
She was my sophomore year college roommate. Dr. Deb. Mm-hmm. The question, Vintage Rachel told us we got extra credit if we repeat the question. So the question,
Barb's
was-
very smart college roommate wanted to know if you had encountered the natural book of nature at age 30, could you have done the same thing, or did you need all this wisdom of all the living you did to do it now?
I think the book I wrote now followed 30 some years of like deeply embracing Judaism, among other things. I think the fact that I realized, in my 50s that I'd never heard of this book made me extra curious about it. And in my 30s, I wasn't a mother until 36 and 45. Thank you very much. So much of my soul comes from being a mother. So, I mean, all of who I am is in this book, and that would have been 30 years ago. So it probably would have been half the length.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Oh, surely.
Don't be shy. Yes, ma'am.
That the spiritual is visible in nature and
Mhm.
being all this positive
Mhm.
word.
Mhm, mhm. Mhm.
What about the dangerous aspects that nature forces us to deal with?
The-
How do we see the spiritual path?
The question is, I write about, or we've talked about a lot of positive aspects of nature, but what about the horrors of nature, the heartbreak of nature, the violence of nature? That's a great question. I've encountered it. I haven't lived through, I haven't lived through, right, forest fires, tsunami, all of it. I mean, I think it reminds us in the ways I've encountered the forces of nature when they're destructive. It reminds me how small, how fragile we are. And I think that's a really important spiritual posture. I spend a whole lot of time in my life feeling small, and the vastness of creation, even in its placid states, has that effect on me. And so the ravages of nature, which are real, I think would affect me in that same profound way. And surviving that kind of heartbreak, that exercise of the heart and the soul is, it's necessary, it's imperative.
And you could also turn to Job for a few things
Job.
on that subject. You know, my ways are not your ways. I think there was a hand.
A little bit further back.
Beth, yeah.
Yes. Mhm. Beautiful, beautiful. For Rachel, I will repeat her beautiful comment, which was that my mention of my mystical experience in that chapel reminded her of a teaching from her yoga instructor, which was that if you don't see God in all, you don't see God at all, which is a beautiful way of saying it. Now, don't rub your nose, because I thought that was a hand up. All right, why not? We're halfway there.
They both have similar titles.
Okay.
They felt like had some great ideas or facts that they didn't fit anywhere else. They felt I gotta get them down maybe where here they are. Like one of them had to do with 7,000 birds that died, sitting glass windows or something.
That would have been in the epilogue, Lamentations for the Book of Nature. And I think I talked to, okay.
There are also the astonishments. It might,
Those
are the small, they're like
Oh.
the commonplace book. So
the litany, the litany of astonishments,
Yeah.
which for years I'm one of those people, and it might be a little bit more unusual, but I'm one of those people for whom science amplifies spirituality for me, as science and religion there's not a deep schism between the two for me. And so when I just am awestruck by some of these amazing wonders of creation, that this choreography that, that the fat, juicy caterpillars are coming out of the tree at exactly the moment the baby bird is ready for, its first mushy food. The fact that baby birds memorize the night stars while they're still in the nest, and that some species of birds, the mama and papa take off on their migration ahead of the littlest guy, and he takes off to the skies all by himself. How in the world? Or the monarchs who fly, to the same tree in Mexico year after year after year. So the litany of astonishments, to me, just like sort of hit the nail on the head, that there has to be a God who created and invented and authored all of this because it's just, it's a divine intelligence beyond anything any of us or Chat GPT could figure out.
Or we'll give you an easy one here.
Okay.
As a lifelong Midwesterner, I have to ask you, what's the spiritual value of winter?
Okay, I love winter. I'm a winter baby. I wrote a book on the stillness of winter. Winter's stark beauties, the survival of the species, including ourselves in winter, the quiet of a morning after, a magnificent snowstorm. There's so much, just that furrowing in, that infolding that comes when, the parallels to nature are so profound, to the garden. You don't see anything stirring. We have times in our life when we don't think anything is happening deep down in our underground, but lo and behold, springtime comes and something beautiful emerges.
Are you troubled the last few winters on how weirdly unwinterish they've
Yeah,
been?
yeah, yeah. It's scary. It is scary. The notable fading of seasonal distinctions is really sad.
Do we have other questions for Barbara?
I just want to thank all of you for coming. This has been quite a journey for me.
I think Daniel has Kleenex somewhere.
Okay.
Daniel, we need Kleenex up here. Kleenex on aisle 1, please.
This book was published, and 2 weeks later, I had pretty profound surgery that was really tough. So that's why we had to postpone. My husband keeps saying, you didn't cancel it. You just postponed it. So we just postponed it because I had major surgery in April. And as a result of that surgery, my vocal cord was paralyzed and I didn't even have a voice. So to be here, sitting in front of all of you 2 months after that surgery, and looking at your beautiful faces, thank you. Thank you.
So what helped you through those 2 months of recovery from that?
The garden. Oh, that guy right there. That guy right here. As Maureen wisely said, my husband, my kids, people I love, the kindness, the profound kindness of strangers, of fellow travelers on the cancer road. They've been incredible. I've spent a lot of time in my garden. I realized I didn't finish cleaning my fingernails. I was in the garden all day yesterday. The garden, I had surgery on April 18th, and on April 18th in Chicago, at least, the garden still looked like a lot of naked sticks. And it has been coming to blossom and to bloom as I am on my own road to reblossoming. So I feel so embraced when I'm outside and in all of creation, and the birds and the things rising up from the ground and the trees harboring me. I feel completely held in the hand of God.